Hello and welcome to part 3 of the Space Invaders tutorial. Now our game is coming along. We've got enemies that display, here they go, they display and they move across, which is good. And we've got a player and he can fire and he can move. So we're starting to look like the Space Invaders game that we all know and love. There we go. So we've still got a few things to develop and we've got a few glitches to sort out. So the first thing we're going to sort out is that obviously when I press start, it displays the explosion, which is not really what we want. So what we can do is click on the enemy, and when we start as a clone, we'll just move it, there we go. When we start as a clone, what we will do is we'll broadcast animate, and that should switch to, before it actually puts the sprite anywhere, it will actually switch to the correct costume. So let's have a look. Let's try that. Hopefully, let's see if that works. There we go. Perfect. So that's sorted that first glitch out, which is good. The second glitch, which is slightly more complicated, is because the original sprite, which you can't see at the moment, is still around here somewhere, it still actually gets affected by the rest of the scripts, which can cause little glitches that we don't want. So what we need to do is we only want the enemy move code here to affect clones. And the way that we do that is we need to use a variable, and we create a variable and we call it am I a clone? Question mark. So am I a clone? Make sure it's for this sprite only, because each individual clone is going to keep track of that. And at the start of the game, set I am a clone to no, or false. We do false. Okay, because that means the original sprite isn't a clone. But whenever this clone starts as a clone, then we set am I a clone to true. There we go. Good. So what this means now is that we have a variable called am I a clone that lets us check to see if something is a clone, which is good. And how are we going to use that? Well, what we're going to do is this bit here, when we receive enemy move, we're only going to do that if we're talking to a clone. So we can go if, there we go, am I a clone is true. Then we can do all of the other bits of code there. Yeah, there we go. So if I am a clone, then we do that. Otherwise, we don't bother. There we go. In fact, let's put that big again. Good. So now, hopefully, if we run this, you really shouldn't notice a difference most of the time. Let's just hide those two. It should just work as it's expected to work, but sometimes it just goes a bit glitchy if we didn't do that. You might not notice in your game until it does something really, really weird, and you can't work out why the sprites aren't moving properly. There we go, and hopefully there you go. Yep, they're going back. Good. Okay, good. So the next thing we're going to do now is we're going to move on to getting the enemies shooting at the player. So in order to do that, the way it works is that every second, a random enemy that's still alive shoots at the player. So we need to have a way of picking one of these random enemies. And the easiest way to do that is what we do is at the start of the level, when we're creating all of these enemy clones, for each of the enemy clones, we give them a number. So, and we add that number to a list. So we need to create a list. So make a list. We'll do this in the stage, and we call this enemy clone numbers. Enemy clone numbers. And at the start of the level, we just make sure we empty all of that list, delete all of the empty clone numbers. And then what we do is we need to create a new variable called enemy, we'll just call this count, actually, for the moment, count, because it's just a counter. And what we do is we set the counter to 1, because we start at number 1. And each time we create a new clone, which is just here, we do two things. Number 1, we add that count to the enemy clone numbers, which if you see that now, it'll go do, okay. That's okay, but we need to keep, once we've added that count, we need to change the count by 1. There we go. So there you can see it's adding all of those numbers here onto the list. There you go. Adds all those numbers onto the list. And then as we're adding all of these counts into the list, what we also do is when we create this enemy, when I start as a clone, the very first thing that we do is let's create another variable and call this my number for that enemy. So, okay, and we set my number to the count. There we go, good. My number to the count. So that now should, there we go, it creates 56, there we go, all the way along, not 56, it will create 55 numbers and adds all 55 numbers to that list. Brilliant. Once that's done, what we can do now is every time we come to shoot, we'll just pick one of those numbers from the list and get that particular alien to shoot. So we'll just stop that now. And there we go. When I receive start level, let's add another one of these. Okay. When I receive start level, all we'll do is we'll just have an infinite loop forever, and we'll just shoot. Here we go. Shoot. Forever. What we'll do is we need to pick a random item from this list. So the way that we do that is item, we use that, and we need to pick a random one from it. So we can use length of, so we need to go and get a random item. Now in Scratch, there's not a way of just picking a random item. What you have to do is you have to say, okay, pick a random number from 1 to the length of that list, wherever the list is. Oh, there it is. Don't use that one. So we pick a random number between 1 and the length of the list, which is this number here, and then whatever that number is, we get that item of the list. And it's this item here that's going to be the chosen item. That's going to be the enemy number to fire. So let's create a new variable and make a variable enemy number to fire. There we go, good. Enemy number to fire. So when I receive start level, all we're going to do is we'll just wait a second and then set the enemy number to fire to that number that they've picked out of that list. Let me just make that a bit smaller so you can see that. So there you go. When I receive start level, set the enemy number to fire to somewhere between 1 and the length of that list, and then go and get that item and put that into there. Once you've done that, then you broadcast enemy fire. So we can get the enemy to fire, broadcast enemy fire. There we are. And then, so what we've done there is we've gone to picked a random number from the list of enemies and set that variable enemy number to fire to that, broadcast enemy fire, and then now on the enemy, what we need here is when I receive enemy fire, if my number matches that number, so if my number, where's my number? If my number is equal to the enemy number to fire, then we're going to fire. But at the moment, we're just going to say pew, 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 fire. There you go, do fire for the moment. Let's just test that for now. Let's see if that's working. There we go. So let's try that. Let's just hide all these lists and variables and things so we can actually see what's going on. And we'll just do here, we'll just do 1 every 1 second. We'll fire, 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 fire. Brilliant. So it's now picking a random character each time, which is good, and getting a random one to fire. But what we also need to do is we need to Every time that this enemy dies, then we also need to get rid of the enemy and get him out of that list as well. So where's the... there we go. Hang on, let me just clean up my blocks because we've got millions of blocks here. Let's find the one that we need. When I start as a clone, animate, enemy move, enemy fire. Ooh. Where's my costume gone? Oh, here we go. It's this one here. I've lost it. There we go. So when he's killed, when the enemy is killed here, we wait 2 seconds, we also need to remove his number from the list. So it's this bit of code here we need to change. So what we need to do is we need to go to that list and we need to find the item number of his number. So we go find the item number of my number. There we go. So find that item number of that, and then we delete that item number from the list. So we go find my number in the list, and then whatever number position it's at, it deletes that from the list. And that should mean that every time I shoot one of the enemies down, it should make that list a little bit shorter. Let's find out. So let's just go show you that list there. So there you go. We got 55 there still. There you go. Can you see now the length of the list has gone down to 54, and we're starting to get rid of some of these numbers. There we are. Let's have a look. So we got rid of there we go. That's number 2. There we go. And slowly but surely, those numbers, hopefully now, if we shoot all of them, we should be able to see that it's getting rid of those ones. Let's have a look. I mean, it doesn't really matter what the number is, as long as the number that we get rid of corresponds to the one that's firing. Good. Yeah, there we go. Perfect. Good. So that seems to be working okay. We'll just keep an eye on it, make sure there's no bugs. So now what we need to do is, as the enemy is firing, we need to actually get the enemy to fire. And we use a similar sort of setup as the player bullet. So we need to first of all upload another sprite, and we're going to use the enemy bullet sprite this time. Good. And all we do is when I receive enemy fire, where do we go? Where's oh, I've just gone now. There he is. Where do we delete him from? Here. All we do is we come along here, and this time we need to do slightly more complicated because the enemy is going to have to spawn a clone of the enemy bullet at his location. Obviously, the enemy bullet isn't going to know which clone is which and where to clone from. So we need a couple more variables, and we do enemy bullet X location, or if I X start, let's do X start. That's where the enemy bullet is going to start on their X coordinate. And we do enemy bullet X start to the X position of the one that's just died. Oh no, we don't do it there, do we? We do it when he fires. Oops. Sorry. Let's just get rid of that. We don't do it there. We do it when he's firing, if he's chosen. Hang on, where's that at? No. All the way down here. When I receive enemy fire. Yeah. So we put it in here. When I receive fire, if I'm the one that's firing, then what we do is we set the enemy bullet X start to the X position of here. Then we do a similar thing for the enemy bullet Y start. Okay. Enemy bullet Y start and set that to the enemy's Y position. There we go. Move him out of the way there. And then we do a broadcast saying fire enemy bullet. Fire enemy bullet. Good. Excellent. And now all we do with the enemy bullets here is, at the start of the game, we hide the sprites because we don't want it anywhere. And then when we spawn as a clone, what we do is we set my X coordinates. In fact, we can just do both, can't we? Go to, and this is where we use the enemy bullet X start and the enemy bullet Y start. There you go. So when I start as a clone, I go to the exact position of the enemy that's just spawned me. Then I show, and then we do some kind of thing where it starts to shoot. So forever, and then we start to move down. Move down, move down. Where's my move down? Change Y by mine. Let's do -5 for the moment. We might change that later on to make it go quicker. Okay, good. So let's see if that works. Oh, yep, that's about there. But unfortunately, I need to go to the enemy. And the bit where it says fire, we need to actually replace that with that bit. X location, X start, fire bullet. And then enemy bullet, show. Oh yeah, that should work. Let's see if that works. No. Why is my bullet not showing? Is my costume there? Yeah, that's there. It's not moving. Let's have a look. Oh, we need to clone, don't we? Ah, oops. We don't broadcast enemy fire bullet at all. We just create a clone of the enemy fire bullet. Here we go. Let's have a look. Create a clone of enemy bullet. Good. Hey, that's more like it, isn't it? There we go. So now we've got things moving. I was wondering why things weren't working there. Good. Cool. So the enemy bullets are firing. That's okay. Good stuff. And at the moment, they're just going all the way through and not a lot's happening. But there's a couple of things that can happen. First of all, they could touch the background here if they're touching green. And if they're touching green and it's not touching the player, then you know that they've hit the... if they're not touching the player, but they are touching green, then you know that they've either hit this bunker here or they've hit the ground. So what we can do there is, let's just find out, the easiest way to do that is we need to test, as that bullet's going down, we need to see what it's hitting. And so what we can do here is we can just do an if statement. Okay, and we can say, okay, if touching color, where are we at? If touching color, click there, use the eyedropper, green. If we're touching the color, that color green. And what we can also do here is if you look at the coordinates of the player here down the bottom, when he starts, the player's right down the bottom there, his X coordinate is really far down here. It's like -163. So, oh no, we can't do that. Ignore that. We'll do another way of doing it. Hang on. Enemy bullets, if touching color green, and we'll just do it the other way, and not touching the player. This is the easier way. Hopefully this should work fine. So if they're touching the color green and they're not touching the player, then it must mean that they're touching either here or here, in which case what we need to do is just get the bullet to explode and delete some of the scenery. And the way we do that really is quite simple. When we start as a clone, we switch our costume to the enemy bullet costume, just like that. And then when we explode, what we do is we create ourselves a new costume. There we are. Did I do? No, there we go. Paint. Create ourselves a new costume. Convert to bitmap. And what we'll do is we'll just do a little bit of an explosion. Use the pen tool, and we're going to explode. And here is the trick. We do like a little explosion. Maybe do that as 3 or something. You could edit this later on however you want. But what we do is we do a little black explosion like this. And this is going to be the kind of the explosion radius that deletes all the other stuff. There we go. So the bullet comes down and is white. As soon as he hits the green thing, he turns into this costume. And then the clever bit is we use the stamp tool. So what we do, switch to costume, and that'll be, let's call costume 1. Let's change that to explosion. And what we do here is we switch to the costume, which is the explosion costume. And then we need to use click down to the extensions, click on pen, and we need to use the stamp tool. There we go, stamp. Good. And what this will do now, hopefully, is this. There you can see what I did there? It starts to stamp his way through there. Good, good. So as soon as it hits it, it starts to stamp its way through. Unfortunately, they're just going all the way through, and that's because nothing's happening as soon as it stamps. So what you need to do there is you just need to change that to, after you've stamped itself, we'll just delete this clone. There you go. And now, hopefully, switch to explosion stamp. There we go. It's just about there. They're just about there. We're almost there. There's a slight glitch, and the reason is this. If you go to enemy bullet, click on enemy bullet, and convert to vector, you'll see that the actual bullet isn't sitting exactly on the dot. So we'll convert it to vector, leave that there. Click on your explosion, click convert to vector, and do exactly the same thing, but make sure your explosion is in the center of the dot. Because the enemy bullet is here, we want the explosion to be at the tip of the bullet, and I think that should solve that. Let's have a look. Yes, that's starting to solve that now, isn't it? It just wasn't quite in the right location. Good. One more problem is now you can see every time I click start, it's not rebuilding my scenery. So the way we can fix that is every time we go back to the backdrops, go to the stage, every time we start level, where should we put it on this one? Let's put it on the main one. Every time we start level, we need to go to the pen and we need to erase all of the things that were done before. There we go. Good. So now, there you go. We've got these random enemies that are firing, they're shooting at the player, and if they hit the scenery, then they destroy, which is good. So now we're almost there. We've got the enemy moving, they keep moving down, we've got the player moving, and we've got the enemy and the player shooting. The only thing we need to do now is we need to get the scoring system, and we need to get the player live system, and a start menu as well. But we'll leave that in into part 4. Okie dokie, good luck.